Social media, the internet, Instagram comments, YouTube comments. If there's something that I've noticed is players love to drop controversial opinions that are going to be jarring and triggering for people reading them. The comment section on a YouTube video can be a dangerous place to scroll through, as I'm sure you guys are aware of. Now, that aside, I do have to mention that some of the controversial statements or opinions that people do leave can have great analysis, great information. There's a lot of thought that's put behind them. These are a bunch of comments that I get on my videos that I have to look through and go, do you know what? That person has actually made a phenomenal point, and it's something I need to address in another video. So some of you do great work in the comment section, and some of you guys are savage. Now, in this video, I wanted to take a look at hot takes. Some of these controversial opinions that get people triggered, I kind of love them because it gets people talking, gets people communicating, sharing their opinions, and sometimes the resolution can be something that we can all benefit from. Now, what I want to do in this video, something I've never done before, is look at some of these hot takes that you guys gave me. You guys gave me a bunch of them. I can't go through all of them in this video because there was a lot, but I've kind of tried to pick out my favorite ones, pick out some that I think you guys are going to have fun with in the comment section, and we're going to go through them and pretty much answer if they're good takes or bad takes. Let's jump in. Now, the first hot take, Warrior is the most slept on brand, and I feel that will change soon. Now, this is a statement that I kind of feel goes in two parts. Now, I've covered why Warrior content isn't featured as much as we'd like to on the channel. It comes down to access. If we can't get a product in our spec, it makes it incredibly difficult to make a video about said product. Bunch of videos that I've posted in the past have covered this, even though some of you in the comments are like, why isn't there Warrior featured? That's why. If we can't get it, we can't make a video on it. Now, Warrior being the most slept on brand, I kind of feel like, yep, Warrior probably should get a lot more attention and praise and should be featured in players' hands a lot more than you see. But again, that comes down to probably what I just touched on, access. If people don't have access to a product, they don't have as much access to a particular brand over another one, it's going to make it very difficult for players to be able to jump on that brand and kind of, you know, take it to town. Now, in terms of the most slept on brand, if we're looking at the brands that have been out there for a long time, which is Graph, CCM, Bauer, Sherwood, Warrior, and of course now True Hockey as well. Those brands, which is the most slept on in my opinion, I'm going to go Sherwood. Now, they have been quiet for a while and have come back in a big way, which I touched on in two videos that I've previously shot. I'll link both of them down below. I think Sherwood is the most slept on brand because their products aren't as accessible as Warrior, Bauer, CCM, and True Hockey. When you go into retail stores across the globe, I'm not talking about a particular place in the state of New York or in BC in Canada where you have a lot more options than a lot of the world would do. If you go into a random shop in, for example, Norway, it is incredibly unlikely that you're going to see a good selection of Warrior products. You're going to see a lot of Bauer, a lot of CCM, maybe a little bit of True. Now, this is what I've seen traveling across Scandinavia. Different Scandinavian regions favor one brand over another, particularly Bauer or CCM. So that's what I feel like kind of contributes towards a brand being slept on. If players can't use it, try it, and see it, it makes it very hard for them to get their hands on it. And of course, who is using what in the NHL has a big trickle-down effect to the rest of us, even though the NHL, as I've mentioned many times, is not the best place to go to see what equipment is the best. I've had a whole video on this that I'll link down below. It'll be the first video I link down below. I've explained exactly why in that video. I'm not going to go into it in this one, but if you look at the leagues that get much less attention that are semi-pro or pro, essentially where there is less notice or, you know, worry about brand deals and endorsements and sponsorships, etc., that's where you get a real feel for the percentages of what manufacturers are being used by players that are of an elite level. But, you know, another video that we could do on that. But in my opinion, I think that's a good and a bad take, because Warrior Hockey, although they should be praised more and they should be used more and we should feature them more, I feel like they still do get a lot of time in players' hands in professional leagues and also in shelf spaces in retail stores as opposed to Sherwood Hockey. But that's what I think about that one. Comment down below if you agree or disagree. I'm going to go with that's a good and a bad take. Now, the next take is expensive gear makes you better because you work harder to be able to use it to its full potential. Now, this is a bit of an interesting one, and you might agree or disagree with this, but I remember when I first kind of started to get my hands on equipment that I was buying as the channel was kind of growing, I used to kind of feel like I had plateaued in my skating ability before I even played hockey. And every time I got a new pair of skates, because it was a brand new pair of skates, it was expensive, I felt like I had to work harder to justify the purchase. And that led to me slightly becoming a better skater. Now, that translating into hockey, it's something that some players might have a connection to. There's a lot of what happens on the ice in terms of our development and our preferences over equipment that's psychological over it being an actual performance difference on the ice. If you're in something that you feel warrants your best ability, naturally you're gonna try a bit harder because you're using something that is of a better grade than what you had previously. Like, for example, if I'm in my old Bauer shin pads, I'm not really gonna want to jump in front of the net and block a shot. Now, if I go for some brand new ones from CCM that have that D3O goo inside them that are, you know, top spec, I'm gonna feel like, do you know what? I've spent so much on these, I know what's inside them, I know how they work, so I'm gonna try and play that much better, that much harder, block some shots, because I now feel like I have to justify the expensive purchase. But I don't know if that is just me or if a lot of you out there can relate, but do you feel that when you buy something that's new and expensive, it makes you want to work harder? Or do you think the opposite of that? This is a bit of a tricky one. I don't know if that's a good take or a bad take. I'll let you guys kind of decide in the comments. Because this is a personal one for me, I'm going to have to put it in the good take section. But you comment down below and let me know what you think about that one. Next take from there is Easton was one of the best hockey gear brands of its time and Bauer ruined it by buying it. Now, acquisitions in hockey are something we see all the time. In more recent times, we've seen it a lot more than pretty much any other time in hockey, based on my knowledge. Now, with one brand or one manufacturer or one company buying another one, there can be numerous reasons for that happening from a business perspective, whether that is to increase its territories, i.e. geographical expansion, whether that's to acquire technology or knowledge or expertise from the staff and the people behind one brand coming into another one. This is where you see, for example, the skate designer that made the MLX skates, Dave Cruikshank, moving over to Easton and helping them to create the Mako skate. I think that's where the expertise and knowledge comes in. And of course, increasing market share is always going to be a big one for pretty much any manufacturer that is out there. So those reasons aside, it's always a strategic reason when one brand buys another one. Now, it's really difficult as brands merge or they're acquired or they grow to maintain the kind of ethics and standpoint that they had when they were in their infancy. It's a lot easier to stay connected to your audience, to players, when a brand is smaller and there's only a few people that work there. As it grows and becomes, you know, part of a corporation, it's very difficult for them to still encompass the same belief system that they had when they were starting out. And a big part of that is perhaps the people that were running it at one point aren't the people that are running it now, which means they might go in a completely different direction, following a completely different vision. You see this all the time in industries, especially in hockey, also in tech, in manufacturing of any kind. So that's always a tricky one. Did I prefer it when Easton was a separate company? 100%. I loved the Mako skate. I think that's one of the best skates that's ever been made. There's a couple others that I have under that, but we could do that as a completely separate video. I don't want to digress too far. I loved Easton sticks as well, which, as we know, a lot of players really were big fans of as well. Now, them becoming part of Bauer, has that ruined the brand? Because obviously it's just not about anymore. You don't see the Easton logo in stores. I'm going to probably have to say that that's a good take. I do feel like it was much better when Easton was on its own, but I understand why Easton was acquired and I understand how that's helped Bauer to grow to the scale that they are today. So, good take. Now, next hot take is True makes the ugliest skates. That's such a short, brutal statement. I feel like it's always going to be an issue of taste and personal preference with the way skate designs look. When you look at skate designs over time, all of the brands that were out there when there was loads of them all had subtle differences between them. And then as time moved on, every brand started to look like every other brand. There was a lot of copying. I'm not going to say one brand is copying one. They all do it. They all do it. Even their color schemes are similar now. It's a case of if players have been kind of like molded to like a certain look or a certain style in terms of their skates, it makes sense for a lot of brands to kind of adopt that same thought process of, if this is what players like, if it isn't broke, don't fix it, let's give them what they like. That's what, you know, a lot of the brands do. Now, True have a completely different philosophy on skate manufacturing, and I feel like their look is unique. Now, while it's not something that might appeal to everyone, I actually like the fact that their skates look different, because everything in hockey is becoming so blended and the same and mundane, it's boring. If you were to remove the colors and the logo off of a pair of skates, just the bright colors, whether it's silver or orange or red, if you removed that and the company's logo from the side of a skate, it would be very difficult to identify what skate that is. The only way that you'd be able to tell is probably by their holder, and even then it can be hit and miss if someone's, ripped out a holder and put it onto a different pair of skates. What I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of similarities with the way skate designs look today. And when you have a company that does something completely differently, the way that their skates are manufactured is completely different from a custom perspective, that's a big deal for me. So for me personally, I have to say bad take, because I like the fact that True are so different to the other brands that are out there. It's what makes them unique. And if you've used one of their current pairs of skates in the correct fit for yourself, it's very difficult to use anything else after you've adjusted. But that's just my perspective. So for me, bad take. From there, next hot take is going to be Protective hasn't improved in recent years. This is, I'm going to say, good take straight away. Now, let me explain why, because similar to iPhone releases, I love to use this as a base or like a kind of foundation or analogy, because I feel like it's one pretty much everyone can relate to. Whether you're Android or iPhone, you're aware of iPhone releases. If you get the iPhone 15 and you look at the iPhone 14 and you VS them against each other, there's not that many differences between them. It's exactly the same. If you get 2024 Protective and VS it against 2023 Protective, minor differences. Now, if you go 2024 against 2020, there'll be a big difference between those. And if you go back another 4 or 5 years again, there'll be a big difference between that. Over years, there will be significant changes. When you go year to year, manufacturers are just tweaking and refining what they have. It's only when they come across a new piece of tech, or when you have two companies collaborating together, like the partnership between D3O, which is actually a UK-based company, been to their offices, I'll show you a video of that at some point, and CCM, D3O and CCM come together and they create incredible Protective. Now, when that happens, of course, we're going to see a big leap, because what was manufactured by CCM before that wasn't anywhere as good as what they have now with the partnership with D3O. Now, same thing with Bauer. They have their own companies that they've partnered with to create their Protective. When you get a significant leap like that, that's when the technology improves drastically. But year to year, it's just going to be a refinement. It's just going to be a tweak. It might even be a case of correcting things that they got in terms of feedback from players that didn't work so well with what they released previously. So it's not often that you see big jumps in tech, and this is the same thing with the skates, with the helmets. It's just incremental. But when you look back over a number of years, you can see how far it has come, especially with Protective. But definitely have to say that that is a good take, just based on the fact that if you go year to year, it's very difficult to warrant how stuff is improving, and if you should even bother considering upgrading. Next hot take is Bauer is trash. Quality over the last 5 to 8 years has been substantially trending downhill for a long time. Now, I feel like trash is probably a bit of a strong word to use, to cover that brand, which is probably going to catch a lot of you by surprise, but I do mean that. I feel like Bauer do a great job a lot of the times. They are one of the biggest brands in hockey. It's arguably they are the biggest name in hockey. If you run up to anyone that doesn't know anything about hockey and you ask them to name a hockey brand, chances are they're going to say Bauer. The same way as if you run up to anyone that doesn't know much about watches, if you ask them to name a luxury watch brand, they'd probably say Rolex. Some of those names are just synonymous with the industry that they're in, which is a great position to be in. But what can sometimes happen, the comment that I love to see in hockey all the time, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. If you get to a stage where the brand feels like they are on top, no one can touch them, they can kind of sit back and not make too many improvements, not make too many innovations, reduce the number of risks that they're willing to take because they're in the number one space. That's when the brands below have a chance to be able to capitalize on that, make the risks to see which is successful, which isn't going to be so successful, and they can capitalize and capture some market share, which is exactly what we're seeing happening today. A lot of the other brands have really upped what they've been making based on the fact that the giant is sleeping. And that's the worst way to be, because that's what can put you in a position to get knocked out of the top spot. But that's my opinion. I don't think that it's fair to call Bauer trash. Like I said, they have phenomenal products, and I feel like they do lead in a lot of ways because they make moves and the rest of the industry follows. So it's difficult to call them trash. A lot of the other brands are quickly catching up, and that is great to see because it means that we win as consumers because products are getting better than they've ever been before. But definitely, I've got to say that that's a bad take, because I can't refer to Bauer as trash, because plain and simply they're not. This hot take ties in really nicely with the one I've just covered. The brands with less popularity than the big two are making products that are just as good, if not better. This is definitely something that, I just covered. When you have the sleepy giant that kind of sits back and stops taking risks because they're number one, the other brands start innovating harder than they ever have before, trying to claw back some of that market share, and it's what we're seeing. Really sweet spot, so automatically this is definitely going to be a good take. The next hot take is Sherwood sticks cost way less than the other brands, so what are we really paying for? That is a fair point. Now, when you look at Sherwood's top spec sticks and you compare them to the other top spec sticks, their sticks cost significantly less than the other brands that are out there. Now, why is that? What are we actually paying for when you buy, sticks from the top 2 brands, you could say, or top 3 brands? Why do they cost so much more? This is one of those questions that we could argue in terms of the name of the brand that carries weight, the size of the company, and overheads and yada yada. Essentially what it comes down to is something is worth what you are willing to pay for it. You could argue that the technologies that some of these other brands are using are much more costly to produce, which when you look at boron in Bauer sticks and the Sigmatex in the CCM sticks and all of these other nano lights and all these fancy tech names that they have, those do cost, and it is real. These aren't made up things that they're slapping onto their sticks to make you pay more money for them. This technology does cost, but the argument is how much of that technology is making a big enough difference to warrant the difference in price. This is where it gets interesting, because while top-end equipment is insanely expensive, there are options below, and manufacturers don't always do, I'm being nice, manufacturers don't do a good job whatsoever of shedding light and promoting the models below top spec. They're essentially in this trend of only glamorizing the gear that the NHL players are using, and some of them are making insane mid-range and entry-level products that never see the light of day because there's just no interest in creating content for those particular types of products. A lot of people say they want cheaper sticks, they want cheaper skates, but when we create videos of cheaper products versus the really expensive ones, you can see a big difference in the view counts. A video on a brand new Bauer stick will get an insane amount of views and interaction and likes and shares versus a mid-range entry-level Bauer product, which nobody cares about, nobody wants to see. So it's a catch-22. If you want equipment to be cheaper, you can just buy the cheaper models. And if you want to have more, of these models being shown on content and online, so you actually know the differences between them and the top spec, there needs to be more interest paid. So it's a very weird one. So I've got to say that is a good hot take, because it is a fair justified point, because Sherwood is making phenomenal products, especially the Code TMP. That is a top spec stick. Its price point compared to like a top end CCM or a top end Bauer, top end Warrior, top end True, there's a big difference in price, whereas the performance is easily comparable, in some cases with those brands even better. But at the end of the day, if players aren't going to use it, they're never going to know for themselves. But overall, good hot take. The last but not least hot take is Bauers are leaders of the industry in numbers, but not in performance. That's quite a savage comment, but at the end of the day, it ties into what I said earlier on in the video. They are the giants, and when they make moves, everyone else listens and follows accordingly. Like when they changed their fit system on skates, pretty much everyone else in the industry did the same thing. And I actually said when I saw that for the first time, and I think we had the Supreme skates, if I remember correctly, when we were looking at that, I'm pretty sure that's what it is, and we did a fit test with those. I said that other companies were going to do that, and that's exactly what's happened. So a lot of the times, other companies do follow what Bauer does, but in terms of innovation, I feel like the other brands are innovating harder and creating products that are distinctively better than what they produced previously than Bauer are to date. Now, again, that doesn't make them a bad company. It's just something that can happen. We do see this happening all the time in different industries. When a company gets to the top, their hunger, it's the same with, even if you look at it in the music industry, like when you have an artist starting out, the music that they produce is insane because it comes from a different place. Once they've been in the industry for a long time and they were established, they've kind of done and got everything they want to get, the music that they put out has nowhere near as much impact as what they were doing previously. But of course, because of who they are, the hype, the name, what's associated with that, they will still sell out stadiums, they will still be able to sell out arenas around the world and do big sales in terms of numbers of people streaming and buying their albums, but the quality and the substance isn't what it used to be. And it's when you see the other artists coming up, the other brands, like in hockey, that's when you start to see them stepping up their game, growing, innovating, and creating products that are arguably better than what the big guns are doing. But that was a mouthful. This was a longer video than I intended it to be. Hopefully you guys like this format. Now, before I go on from there, of course, was that a good hot take or a bad one? I'm going to say good and bad, just based on the fact that there is a lot to undress and unpack in that type of a statement. But hopefully you guys like this format of videos. If you want me to do more of these, let me know in the comment section down below. Of course, as always, comment down below, let me know what you're wanting us to produce next in terms of reviews. Like I said, there's a documentary coming very soon that I want to shoot that's going to be hopefully filmed in Switzerland about graph hockey. I can't wait to hopefully make that happen. I'm saying it in the video so you guys can hold me accountable for it. And everyone that's been moaning about the Mark skates that we haven't dropped a video on those, I have seen the messages. I'm not ignoring them. Like I said, I answered that in the previous video, but Shadow versus Mark, that video will come. But as always, big thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. If you like the hot takes, comment down below because I will be doing more of these. But thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. All the links to videos that I've referenced will be down below in the video description. And take care. Till next time. Peace.